Rise up, winter's past and gone. Tune your strings, tie on your bells, it's time to rant along. Unite and share the flowing bowl, let the music ring. Rise up, raise your voice and sing.
We are really pleased that Tom Hughes has contributed a video for the festival, so sit back and enjoy.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for listening. And isn't it great to be part of this virtual folk festival, a kind of online gathering and that fellowship where we can share music and, in my case, to share some stories. And it's nice to be in touch with some of you there in Cheshire, because I've left that lovely county of my birth and I'm in another beautiful place here, up in the southwest of Scotland, just outside Dumfries. And here I am at the moment recording this at Ellisland Farm, the home of Robert Burns. And I'm in his writing room, and the place where he wrote so many of his songs and also lots of his most famous poems, not least Tam O'Shanter, his great tale of witchcraft and folklore. And I'm going to share some folklore with you now, but not from Scotland. As this is the Chester Folk Festival, I'm going to share some folk tales from the heart of Cheshire, the Chronicles of Vale Royal. Now, there was a time when the great and the good, the lords, even to the princes, found themselves fighting in the name of religion. And sad to say, such things still happen to this day. But this was a time hundreds of years ago, and in the Holy Land, there were men fighting and praying in equal measure. And amongst them, a young prince of England, a prince called Edward. And one day after a battle, word reached his ears that his father, the old king, lay dying. And the young prince, he knew he had to make his peace, and he needed to travel as fast as he could. It was no good going across all the lands through Europe. He had to gather his men and travel by the speediest way, of course, by ship through the Mediterranean. And off they went, and they were making good progress until a terrible storm blew up. It sent waves crashing over the decks. The wind broke one of the two masts of that ship. It looked like the ship would be wrecked and everybody on board would drown. Well, that young prince, he began to pray, and he made a promise and a vow to the Virgin Mary that if he was saved, and the lives of all of his men too, then on his return to England he would found the greatest abbey that the land had ever seen. And no sooner had that promise been made, well, the winds began to die down. The sea, it became calm. There was just enough of a breeze to carry the ship the rest of the way to England. And when the prince and his men and even the whole crew had disembarked, then that ship, it sank in the quiet, still waters of the harbour, as if it had been fated to sink all along, and it was only that promise, that vow, that had saved it. But there was no time to think on that. The young prince, he made his way to his father's bedside as quickly as he could, and they had some words and made their peace just in time before the old king died. And that prince, he became the new king, King Edward, the first of that name. Well, he then started to prove his prowess, his strength, by starting wars with the Welsh and the Scots, until a priest reminded him of his vow that he'd made, that had saved his life. And so he knew it was time to found that abbey. He came with his queen to one of his favourite hunting grounds, and there they laid the foundation stones of what was to become the largest abbey church in the whole of England, the Abbey of Vale Royal. And perhaps on account of that miraculous beginnings, that vow made in the middle of the storm, Vale Royal became a precious place, a blessed place. It was said that travellers lost in the heart of Delamere Forest in the depths of the night, they would be guided by angelic singing and heavenly light towards the Abbey of Vale Royal, where they could be safe. And it was said that the monks there, they didn't have to rise from their beds in the middle of the night to toll the hours on the bells. The bells would ring by themselves. Such was the sanctity of that place. Now, not so far away, there was a village called Over, and that village, it was growing, and the people of the village, they decided that they needed a larger church, and they saved up and they saved funds until they had enough to get masons to build a fine church. And they did that, and the work had been completed, but the church hadn't yet been consecrated. It was due to be dedicated to St. Chad, but that day to bless it hadn't arrived, and who happened to be flying past but the devil? And the devil, well, he saw the church built but not yet protected from him, and so he took his chance. He flew down and he grabbed that church, he took it up under his arm and flew off. Well, the monks of nearby Vale Royal, they hadn't missed this happening. They saw exactly what he was doing, and so they rushed to their church and they began to pull on the bell ropes to ring those bells, for they knew that the devil, he cannot stand the sound of bells. And there old Nicky clapped his hands to his ears, and as he did so, that church, it fell down. It plummeted towards the ground. The monks of Vale Royal, they saw what was going to happen, and so they began to pray. This time they prayed to St. Chad, and a cushion of cloud appeared beneath the church, stopping it being smashed, and there it settled down gently, a mile from where it had first been built. And that is why they say the church at Over is a mile from over. Now, as time went on, the abbey it grew, and the lands it had in its possession, they grew too. And in the village of Over, a lad was born, a lad called Robert Nixon. He had an elder brother, but his mother and father died not too long after his birth. Now, young Nixon, he wasn't a nice chap. He was lazy. He was not much to look at either, but worst of all was his cruelty. While his older brother was working the farm, young Nixon, he would be whipping the oxen rather than just encouraging them. He enjoyed being cruel, but laziness was his main trait. And one day in August, his brother and the other farm hands at work in other fields, young Nixon, he was just there staring at the sky. Well, they just thought that's what he's doing, just being lazy as usual, until he started to cry out, "Oh, ill done Dick, ill done Dick, well done Harry, Harry has gained the day." And they came running over, but he just kept repeating the same words. It made no sense. Well, that's until a few days later, when word travelled up from the centre of England, arriving in Cheshire, and the news was the old king had been killed in battle at a place near Market Bosworth or some such, and the new king was a Welshman called Harry. And then they realised what Nixon had been on about, and everybody in the whole of that area, they came round, they began to call him a prophet. They called him the Cheshire Prophet, and they all came to see what he had to say. And the word of that even reached the ears of the new king. King Harry, he sent a herald up to fetch this prophet. And when the prophet heard, he said, "No, I mustn't go down to see the king. If I go down, I'll be clemmed, I'll starve to death." And the people said, "It's the king. If you ask it, you can't refuse the king." And he said, No, I will starve." And he said, look, I'm sure he'll look after you." And in the end, rather against his best wishes, he was dragged down to London. The king had Nixon there before him, and he thought to test him, and he said, "I've lost my ring. Perhaps your skill can help me find it." And Nixon just said this, "He who hideth can find." Now, I could probably have told you just as much himself, but the king was impressed by this, and the king believed he was a prophet. And he would ask him different things. He asked him things like, "At doomsday, where might a man find safety?" And Nixon said, "In God's croft betwixt Mersey and Dee." But as time went on, Nixon would just start coming out with prophecies like, "Vale Royal will become a raven's nest," or "Vale Royal will meet Norton Priory." And, well, the king, he'd never heard of these places. They were far in the north of his lands, and he didn't really care for that sort of thing. And so he grew bored. And Nixon there, well, he was left to wander around, and he liked to spend the rest of his time in the kitchen, licking and picking at all the food. At least he wouldn't be starved or clemmed there as he'd feared. That's until his licking and his picking it annoyed the cook so much they shut him in a cupboard where, with all the food outside but none within, he did as he'd feared, starve to death. Back up at Vale Royal, times moved on, and the times of that King Harry's son, another King Harry. Times were changing. People had changed their feelings towards the monasteries that had once looked after them, provided employment. Many people wanted to see rid of them. They came up with great tales of how depraved all the abbots and the monks were. And one at Vale Royal was Brother Francis. He was a cellarer. He was in charge of all the wine and the ale and even the spices. The abbot would let him be in control of those expensive luxury spices, the grains of paradise, the cubebs. He would go occasionally to Chester to buy new supplies for the abbey guests. He would go, of course, to Pepper Street, where all the apothecaries and the spice merchants did their trade, and he would bring things back to just tantalise the taste buds of the abbot and his guests. On one occasion, when he went to fetch grains of paradise, the merchant there said, well, you can have them this time, but they're going to be twice as much as the last time you bought them from me. Brother Francis says, why? And the merchant explained, well, grains of paradise, they grow on the tallest tree in the world. And of course, the tallest tree in the world is on the other side of the world. And it's at the top of the highest mountain in the world. And well, we send our merchant venturous ships across there. They make their way over there. They gather the grains of paradise. But before they can do so, they have to climb up that highest mountain in the world. They have to then climb the highest tree in the world. And part way up, there are 4 dragons flying around. And they have to dodge the dragons. And they get them to the branches to collect the grains. But sitting there is a giant with one eye in the centre of its head and a great club. And they have to avoid that giant. And they gather up the grains and they come back, and that's why they're so expensive. But this time, on their way back, they were sailing back across the world. But then they passed by some rocks, and there were some mermaids, and they were singing such beautiful songs. Those sailors, they couldn't resist it. They had to get a bit closer. And as they got a bit closer, they saw the mermaids, and they were beautiful, and they were singing, and they were alluring with their great booby bosoms. And well, the sailors got closer and closer until the ship, it was wrecked on the rocks. Well, some of those sailors there, they even married those mermaids. They settled there for 7 years, but then they realised they'd have to get home. They repaired what they could from the rest of the ship. They made a smaller craft, and they returned back with some of those grains of paradise, not as many as they would normally bring, but that's why this time they're so expensive. And Brother Francis, listening to that tale, he paid the spice merchants of Pepper Street, and he returned to the Abbey of Vale Royal. You see, Brother Francis, he enjoyed the ale, he enjoyed the wine, and he enjoyed food. And there, in the corners of the cellar, the undercroft of Vale Royal, there started to appear the Abbey lubbers, those petty demons that would come and trick men so that the devil could take their soul. But when it came to Brother Francis, well, he was such a jolly chap, he seemed to enjoy it so much, everybody thought good of him. They reported back to old Nick, they said, we can't really tempt him, it's in his nature, it's just what he is. He enjoys greediness, he enjoys the pleasure of food, he enjoys the pleasure of drink. And old Nick said, I'll get it for myself then. And out he came to visit Brother Francis. Now when Brother Francis saw the devil coming into his undercroft, he said, welcome, we're used to entertaining, would you like to take a drink with me? And the devil said, well, you've got your drink here, but I could give you whatever it was that you desired. Not all of this food has to be used by the abbot and his guests. There are things that you could enjoy. You could have whatever you wished. I could give you 3 wishes on condition that you sign this document. And all it asks for is you have whatever you wish in this life, and I have your soul for the next. And Brother Francis thought on this, and he agreed. And the devil brought out a parchment with a contract upon, and he got Francis to sign it. And that ink, it burnt and sizzled as it went into the parchment. That's that done then. But my 3 wishes, said Brother Francis. Yes, said the devil, you start. And so his first wish, he said, could I have unlimited venison pasties? Nothing fancier than that, just pasties. Venison pasties, whole and hearty and wholesome. I'd enjoy those. And so the devil, he conjured up a whole undercroft full of venison pasties. And now, said Brother Francis, unlimited hogsheads of ale. Well, The devil was used to people going for unlimited this and unlimited that, but it was a simple thing. Ale was easy. He filled the next cellar with hogshead after hogshead of ale. And now, said Brother Francis, the last thing I want is just a yard of twisted grass rope from Martin Sands. A yard of rope. Twisted grass rope from Martin Sands. Yes, please, that's all I require. You could have anything you want, and you want a yard of rope. Grass rope, yes, twisted from the grass growing on Martin Sands. Well, the devil, he went off, and he went across Martin Sands. But ne'er a blade of grass was there to be had. And so he couldn't provide a third of those wishes. That contract was torn up. And for many years after, the people of Vale Royal ploughed those sands just to make sure the devil didn't return. Of course, times were changing. However, Brother Francis had escaped the devil. He couldn't escape the way of the king. That King Harry, the eighth of that name, he wanted to plunder the wealth of the monasteries for himself. And so he did. And things came to pass. The abbey was torn down. Much of the stone was taken by the commissioner, Thomas Holcroft, and made into a home for him. And above his coat of arms was the crest of a raven. Vale Royal Abbey became a raven's nest. And some of that stone was mingled with a stone from Norton Priory, also turned down to rubble. And that stone was built into a bridge crossing the River Weaver. And so Vale Royal Abbey met Norton Priory. And so concludes the Chronicles of Vale Royal. So there's my tales for you, and I hope you'll share them with many others. And thank you so much for listening. Thanks.
Many thanks to Tom for putting this together for us.